Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Margaret Ann, and this is Purdy. I still get the directions wrong on this, no matter how many times we do these intros. So this evening is going to be a really exciting fireside chat between our TechHub founder and CEO, Elizabeth Varley, and Pip Jamieson, who is the founder and CEO of The Dots. Prior to starting The Dots, Pip worked in the government as an economist, then moved to MTV, and then joined The Dots. So we're going to hear all about that journey today. We're going to start off with a 45-minute discussion between Elizabeth and Pip. Then we'll move to all your questions, and we'll do the remainder 45 minutes Q&A. So during the first 45 minutes, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to pop them in the YouTube chat. I'm not going to point to which direction that is because I'll probably get the direction wrong, but just pop it in the chat and we'll be sure to get your questions answered. And with that, I'll pass it over to Purdy.
So before we go ahead with the fireside chat, for all of you that have not been to any of our events before or don't know very much about TechHub, just wanted to give you a bit of background in terms of who we are. For anyone that's been to one of our virtual events or any of our in-person events before the whole coronavirus thing, welcome back. For those that don't know, TechHub is a community of technology entrepreneurs. So we work with 400 early stage tech companies and help them to grow and scale their businesses. So there's 400 companies, all at very different stages, based within our community, all working on different products, different types of technology, different industries, but they all have the same common needs: raising investment, hiring great teams, building a really awesome product, and having the kind of legal support, accountancy support, insurance needs. And so we match them with people in the ecosystem that are going to be useful for them so that they don't have to go out there and do that themselves. So for example, we run 2 investor coffee mornings every week where founders can sit down one-to-one with an investor, used to be in person, at the moment it's virtual, and have those conversations that they need to have in order to raise investment or do other things. You can check all of that out on our website, techhub.com, about the events that we've got coming up. One of the other things that we do is look at other founders who have been through the same journey as some of our early stage founders and see how they did it. So how did they scale their team? How did they get investment? How are they dealing with the COVID-19 situation? So that you can learn from them and just have that peer support. So that's what's going on today. It is our fifth fireside chat that we've done remotely now. And all of it's going to be available afterwards on our YouTube channel as well. So you can have a look if you want to watch it again and see it after this. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on our 2 speakers, Elizabeth and Pip. Normally we'd clap at this point. So Margaret Ann, maybe you can clap once I tech.
Thanks very much for that, Purdy, Margaret Ann. I appreciate the applause, Margaret Ann. That was great. I would like to say a very big welcome to all of you joining us from home, or perhaps you're back in the office, and especially to Pip Jamieson, who's here with me today. Thanks so much for joining us on, I guess, what is now TechHub TV.
Oh no, it's amazing to be here.
So we're going to dive in. I'm going to ask you a load of questions. We're going to get some questions from the audience as well. So audience members, please have a think about that. Submit your questions, and then we'll be selecting those for Pip to answer. So first things first, you've been an economist for the government. You've worked at MTV. You've started your own company. What made you move from those things to starting The Dots?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because I was never one of those people like that dreamed of being an entrepreneur. It wasn't like one of those things for me. It was just while I was working at MTV, I just noticed that me and my friends were working in a really different way than that kind of traditional white collar LinkedIn way of work. So people were kind of adopting much more fluid careers. They were, working more on project by projects, increasingly doing side hustles, freelancing. And yeah, all that there was out there on a professional networking side was LinkedIn, and it just wasn't working for me and my friends. And I think on a deeper level, the people I was surrounded with, they wanted more from their careers than just money. Like, money is so important, but they also wanted to have a career that made them happy and gave them fulfillment. And they wanted to work with people that they enjoyed and worked on, things that actually have purpose. And so, yeah, I'm that kind of crazy mad founder that decided to take on LinkedIn because I just saw a real world problem and went, okay, I want to fix that problem. And I guess the rest, as they say, is history.
It's amazing how quickly the time goes by. I've just passed 11 years working on TechHub, and it's just like, wow, how does that happen? It just you dive in and then off you go, and it becomes a massive part of your life. Mm-hmm. So you've mentioned that you were taking on LinkedIn. This is probably a good opportunity to tell everybody what the Dots is all about. How are you taking on LinkedIn exactly?
Yeah, so I guess the easiest way to describe what we do is we're a professional network for people who don't wear suits to work. So, you know, LinkedIn has been geared around that kind of traditional white collar, corporate, linear type careers. And everything we've done is look at the careers of the future. So, for example, instead of promoting yourself via a CV, which is the mainstay of LinkedIn, people post projects and then credit the full team around those projects. So, a project could be an app, and this is the UI designer, UX designer, front-end engineer, back-end engineer, or it could be a magazine, and this is the full editorial team. So we take a much more kind of collaborative approach as opposed to an individual approach that LinkedIn does. And I guess also everything I'm passionate about is helping people connect with opportunities that are, you know, more suited to the modern world. So remote opportunities, freelance opportunities, there are full-time roles on the Dots as well. And then helping people progress their careers, so through virtual learning. So I think a number of our communities on this call right now, which is lovely. And also our kind of Ask Forum, which is helping people get ideas off the ground and find collaborators. So we take kind of the modern slant to what LinkedIn does, which is let's get shit done, let's collaborate together, and let's kind of actually find careers that we love, not just, you know, that corporate career mainstay of LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very similar hearing you talk about that to our ethos at TechHub, which is all about the people around you, pulling people together, getting support from other people, collaborating, and the idea that you know, as an entrepreneur, that you're alone, that you're just sort of doing this on your own. In the same way as with the job, you're not doing it alone. It's very difficult to succeed at something just on your own. You have to have that team around you.
I mean, traditionally, you know, everything was hierarchical, and the modern way of working is very flat and collaborative. And especially, you're so right, when it comes to startups, that's everything. You're only as good as the team you build around you. You can't be an island when you're building a business. And so, yeah, it's about bringing people together to make ideas happen, I guess.
Absolutely. I often feel that the greatest achievement I've had is being able to pull together the people who are on the team of TechHub, because without them, you know, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And, you know, having fabulous people is an incredible skill in itself, and any tools that help you find those people is hugely helpful. And I should point out, actually, if anybody wants to tweet at us, disagree with us, argue with us, repeat something that we've said, follow up with us afterwards, anything like that, I'm at Varley. And Pip is at Pip_Jamieson. So please do tweet us and you know, disagree or cheer on some of the things we've said if you'd like to. So you don't operate only in the UK.
No, so the whole platform is international, so it's accessible to everyone. But we started in London, so about 63% of our community are London-based, 76% are European, and then we do have hubs primarily through the US. But at the moment, it's mainly London and Europe. But most of the companies we work with are London-based. But actually, that's kind of been changing quite quickly since COVID, because everything's virtual these days. So it's interesting that a lot of, you know, the value people were getting from the Dots was, you know, in-person collaborations, in-person events, and, you know, jobs that were London-based. But since the world has changed, So it's become even more international.
Yeah. So where are you finding sort of lots of people are at the moment in the last couple of months moving to different locations because of what's been going on, or staying where they've been visiting family and trying to work from there, things like that?
Well, I think everyone's just become more used to virtual working, and I get really excited about what we're seeing right now in the fact that the world is increasingly moving virtual, remote. So it means like our community can work from anywhere. I mean, Twitter is a perfect example. You know, they've announced that their entire team can continue working remote forever. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity for our community, because it means that you don't have to be based in London anymore. You can be based anywhere, and there's going to be a wealth of opportunities, not just in the UK, but globally, that you can access that probably wasn't accessible before. Companies went, oh yeah, we can work remote. This is wonderful.
Yeah, I think there's talent and tenacity everywhere. And people often have said to me, oh, do you have to be in London to be an entrepreneur in the UK? You can access all sorts of things, but you know, we work in technology. There's no reason that you have to be in a physical place unless it makes particular sense for you. So when you first got started, I imagine that for platforms like yours, marketplace type environments, you have the chicken and egg situation where you need great people, but you need great opportunities on the site. How did you first go about attracting members and then getting the first few high profile companies to be on there as well?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of graft and a lot of work. I mean, we launched with 100, I guess what they call these days influencers, but I literally had coffee with every single person to tell them what I was building and would they be part of launch. And so it was a lot of hard graft, but once we sort of got them on, then it was them spreading the word to their networks. But it's hard getting people to buy into something that isn't real yet. So so unless I met them, I think, you know, just sending them a cold email saying, will you be a member of this community, wouldn't have worked. But they bought into my vision. They bought into where I wanted to take the business. And I guess from there, they sort of came on the journey with me. Companies, I mean, you know, most of our revenue is through recruitment. So companies paying us to hire talent through the site. With the companies, the first like 50 companies we brought on board, we had to give the dots to them for free because we just didn't have a talent pool for them to access. And again, it was just about meeting and I guess selling and grafting and saying, will you be part of this journey? But once that was there, then you see the cogs moving, and then it's just about, for us, everything we really focus on is bringing value to our community. The companies follow, but bringing value to our community is what I kind of obsess about day in, day out, and keeps me up at night, day in, day out.
And so if you were getting started doing that now, was that a network you already had, or was that people you reached out to ask to meet them for the first time?
Yeah, so I've been living in Australia. So I've been living in Australia for 9 years before I started the dots over here. So I'm British originally, but I came back and knew no one. So I was doing a bit of Facebook stalking, like who did I know when I was at uni that's ended up somewhere great, and can you introduce me? So what I sort of realized is people are genuinely lovely, and if they believe in what you're trying to build, they'll help with introductions. So it started with a few meetings, and then it was like, do you have people I can meet? And then it kind of escalated from there. So, but yeah, I had zero network in London when I was starting out.
You saying that people are genuinely lovely, it's one of the things that in running TechHub has always just delighted me, is that you think of entrepreneurs as people who are incredibly busy, who have very little time, who when they're spending time on something else, they're not building their own business, and so that time is really valuable to their business. But entrepreneurs are incredibly generous with their time. There's a real nature, I think, amongst certain communities where people want to help each other out if they think someone's doing something exciting. Did you find that? And if you were starting now, would you take the same approach?
Yeah, I mean, I completely found it. I think the reality is they've all been in my position, and I now empathize with any founder that's starting up again. And I think the trick to it, and I think the challenge I sometimes have when I meet entrepreneurs, is there isn't a clear ask. And like, I've got a very short time, and you know, I work 6 days a week, 15-hour days. So I think it's just really important to have that clear ask. And I think I had that from the beginning. It's like, can you introduce me to X? And then I know they knew exactly how they could help me very quickly. And I find the same with entrepreneurs that I work with. It's like, just give me a clear ask and I'll help connect the dots. I really want to give back. The only challenge being I'm time poor. And if I don't know what that clear ask is, it can be a bit challenging. So, but yeah, there's such a generous spirit across the whole community. I stand on the shoulders of lots of other giants that have helped me along the way, I guess.
If you were starting it now during lockdown, because some of the people who are watching might be just getting started with their businesses, how would you approach doing that kind of outreach when you couldn't have the same sort of in-person connection?
Do you know what? I think actually now is an advantage, because what we're finding is that there's more people that have more time on their hands. So the challenge pre-COVID was that a lot of senior people were very, very busy. Now, you know, their lives are somewhat streamlined. They've got, you know, they're working from home. Things are slightly more efficient. So actually, I think this is a brilliant time. And for me, you know, Zoom video is as good as meeting in person. You can build up the rapport. And hey, everyone loves a walk. So just go for a social distance walk somewhere. Will work.
That's great. You've had lots of success stories that have taken place for members of the DOT. So there's some particularly notable ones that you can relate.
Yeah, I mean, probably a week after we launched was the first time someone emailed to say they got a job, and that was that magic moment. But we get emails like that all the time. I think for me, everything I'm really passionate about is trying to democratize the industry and open up access to everyone, irrespective of socioeconomic background or, you know, ethnicity or gender. And I think the notable ones that really kind of keep me working the pace I do is, I mean, for example, last year we did a fast track program with Google where we fast tracked 50 18 to 25-year-olds who'd never been to university or a first-gen university, because socioeconomic diversity is something that increasingly worries me, that we're not really going to change things if we don't have everyone at the table. So that for me was the most magic bit. And actually last week, one of our fast trackers got onto this space university. So she wants to be a NASA astronaut.
Amazing.
And so she couldn't afford the university. So then she did a call out to our community asking them to fund her to go to university. And now she's going on this space program. And I just love that.
That's incredible. Wow. So, when I was asking for stories, I wasn't expecting space, I have to say. That's really cool. Yeah. You mentioned about diversity then, and you've been quite vocal about it. How do you reflect that on the website, and how could people watching think about the actions that they can specifically take in their businesses?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in if you can see it, you can be it. And so in terms of, I guess, to sort of step back a bit, the reason I'm so passionate about the space is because I'm very dyslexic. I'm not sure if anyone on the call is dyslexic, but fun fact.
There will be some.
There will be. Well, fun fact, 35% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic and 40% of self-made millionaires. So congratulations, it's a superpower. So Joe Malone's dyslexic, Holly Tucker's dyslexic, who started Not on the High Street, Steve Jobs is dyslexic and autistic, and there's just, the list goes on. But I guess, you know, for me, I always felt like I didn't belong. And I think I never really felt I really belonged on LinkedIn. And I've always been passionate about making it, the whole industry, accessible, because, you know, diversity is proven for profitability, creativity, innovation. The stats are there, it's just done. But that still is the challenge of how do you know, change the dial. And so where we come in is we very much help in terms of opening up opportunities to everyone. So and I love men who are on the call, but of our 500,000 members, 68% are female, 31% BAME, 16% LGBT, and we do a lot of work on socioeconomic movement and neurodiversity, which is autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and supporting disabled talent. And I guess the way that you know, started on the platform was we're just very careful in removing biases from algorithms. So, for example, on LinkedIn, if you went to Oxford, you come higher in search results. And then by turn, all of your contacts come higher who also went to Oxford. So we've removed educational background completely from our algorithms. So that means, you know, you level the playing field. Other things we do is we have curation rules. So we only ever feature, we have to feature over 50% of the people we feature are female, 31%, over 30% BAME, and then that has a knock-on effect. But I think most importantly, it's been building an inclusive, positive space that is very supportive of each other and not a negative space. And so that's something I feel very passionate about, that if you come to the Dots, you feel like you're being supportive and it's a lovely environment. And don't get me started on Twitter.
How do you incentivize that kind of positive behavior on a platform? Because that's something that, you know, like you mentioned Twitter, it can be really difficult once something takes off for you to be able to control that element. How do you bake that in?
Yeah, well, our community is very vocal, and obviously we have reporting features across the site, but we just have a very strict takedown policy on people. And for me, like, I'd be the worst person to run Twitter. I would have deleted Trump years ago. So I have no problem deleting people from the platform. If you want to be negative and nasty, go to Twitter. But our community, I mean, all our communications, everything we nudge people in. So if someone asks, you know, when you reply to questions on the Dots, you know, it's please share positive responses. Everything we do is nudge people into positivity. And our community kind of get that. And then when people aren't being like that, they'll let us know very quickly. And then we respond to that very quickly. So actually the one, a really, you know, one that broke my heart recently was, we actually had someone come to the Dots who put up a fake job and then started like trying to basically date people on the site. And our community.
I wish I was shocked, but I guess I know my jaw dropped. But you know, the second later, it's like, well, yeah, I guess I'm not surprised, which is a shame.
Yeah, and like, you know, it was all happening off platform. Like he was WhatsApping these people. It was really inappropriate. What was really strangely lovely about it is our community were like, they got straight in touch and said, we know this is against your values, just so you know what this is. And obviously straight away, we deleted that person, we deleted the job. And actually it was really fun. Like the Daily Mail, who I hate, by the way, picked up the story, but just said it was nice that there's an ethical tech platform. And like, I'm fine to delete someone, even if they're being not ethical off my platform. If they're not ethical, they're just not ethical. And I have real problems with the stance that the Valley is taking at the moment. You know, Zuckerberg's stance on free speech over hate speech. Like, yeah, you know, if someone's doing hate speech, they should be deleted. Sod that whole free speech principle.
We have a responsibility in the industry to make sure that we are setting an example and ensuring that people aren't using our products for ill. And I think one of the things that is often not thought about, because entrepreneurs and technology creators can be so focused, is the unintended consequences. I think it's difficult for us we look at the impact of our products, but we don't often look at the unintended impact. You know, looking outside, trying to take the steps forward. What could happen? What could be the negative effects of what we're doing, and sort of plan that as part of the product development. You know, what could creep in at any of these points. And it sounds like you've really looked at that in terms of the nudge type approach that you've taken.
It's the nudge, and also algorithm bias worries me. So it's in our algorithms all the time. I'm always questioning, are we making sure that when someone's doing a search for talent on the Dots, for example, that we're surfacing people that reflect society, not just the biases that already exist? And so, yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of like,
it's really important.
Keeps me up at night. But conscious scaling is a huge part of what we've been thinking about.
And speaking of scaling, you raised 4 million in 2017, and you haven't raised since. Is that right?
No, I needed a break.
How have you managed? 2017 was 4 years ago. How have you managed since then? Well, perhaps tell us a bit about that fundraising experience, and then a bit about why you haven't raised again.
Yeah, I mean, I probably will raise again. The reality of what I'm building is you can have a profitable business in one country, but to launch in other countries, you do need more capital. In terms of the experience, I mean, raising is horrific for any founder. It's just the most awful process you have to go through. And it's grueling because every founder, you get no's after no's. There's no example of any founder that didn't, you know. And it's sort of soul destroying. And also because you have to while you're raising, you're not really building. And so you're having to constantly juggle building a product, keeping the momentum going while raising finances. And that was actually my second round. And so what I learned from my first to the second was for the first month of the raise, I just pitched to people I really didn't like. And the reason
you wouldn't want to say yes because you wouldn't want to work with them.
Yeah, so I had kind of my dream list, and then I had the ones that I'd heard not so great things about in the market. And the reason I pitched to them first was to get myself pitch ready. And so, you know, I was pitching to some really hard characters that I knew would just ask really tough questions. And by the end of it, I had a brilliant list of all the questions I would ever be asked and all the responses, which I kept like on a Google Doc. And, you know, while I was coming home at the end of the evening wanting to cry on my husband's shoulder, it got me proper pitch ready. And I think it's a very similar approach, I think, to finding work as well, in the fact that don't go for that dream company straight away. Get some interviews in first because it builds up that kind of interview muscle. But yeah, it's a horrible process for any founder to go through. And I think founders should really ask if they want to sell shares first and foremost. I mean, the vision I have for the Dots, which is very much to become the next LinkedIn, you know, raising money is part and parcel of that vision, because, you know, tech is very expensive. You need money for new countries and new launches, but it's not a journey for everyone. I wouldn't recommend it unless you really, really need it.
How long did it take you, the last raise?
I think it's about 6 months from start to beginning. So anyone who does it under 6 months or says they do, I think is lying. I've never met a founder who's done it under 6 months. So the moment we started putting together the pitch and then started outreach, and then even from the moment they say yes, you still have to go kind of through DD and then close. And so yeah, it was about 6 months, but yeah, it's a tough process.
That makes sense. What sort of advice would you give to people who are watching, who founders who have creative or community-based businesses, which may be seen slightly differently to some other, you know, deep tech businesses, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think if you've got a community-based product, the first thing that you should care about is your community, and is it working for your community? And so very much like being very involved. You know, I'm very involved in my community. We have a beta club. I'm constantly chatting to them about improvements. And I think you should really worry about that before you sort of go into a round. I think the reality here in the UK is a lot of investors don't understand community plays. It's more of a US-based thing. And, you know, what I've been doing over the last kind of year is building up relationships with US-based investors, because they're the ones that really understand this space. You know, UK tend to be first-generation investors who are sort of invest in deep tech or SaaS-based products. So yeah, I'd suggest starting to build relationships with people in the US is a good thing.
And when you've had that kind of deep relationship with your community, is that something that's impressed the investors you've approached?
If they understand community building, 100%. In terms of other ones, it really falls into that camp. I can tell straight away if they get community because of the questions that they ask. And I tend to get more of those questions from US-based investors than I do from UK-based investors. The UK-based investors ask very different questions. And that's a huge generalization, by the way.
Of course. And with that kind of robust community, how do you manage that when you're scaling? There's lots of people who have a community-based business or something that really involves people in that way, and you can have that great energy. You mentioned Twitter earlier. I remember what Twitter was like in 2008 compared to what it feels like now, and that that sense of community is not the same in the way that it was. How can you preserve that when you're scaling and hopefully becoming as big as LinkedIn?
For me, it's just listening. I do a lot of listening and a lot of, we do a lot of research, a lot of listening, and a lot of, working out what's working for our community and what isn't. We're 500,000 members, so I can't talk for when we're, 1 billion members, but but yeah, I think for us, we've just always taken I think what's interesting in tech is everyone talks a lot of tech. Everyone talks about, machine learning, or we do, it's all about the tech that's there. And I mean, tech is really, really important, obviously, for a tech company. And the product is really important, but actually the most important thing is the community and what the community needs. And so, it's a lot of kind of research, a lot of listening, and, moving with the times very quickly, which we had to do as lockdown happened. Our whole community, moved virtual overnight. So how can we improve the product to make their lives better? So, for example, we launched a coronavirus support hub, which was on our Ask forum, where people could ask for advice about, 41% of our community is freelance. So are they eligible for government freelance support? How do they pick up clients? So I think for us, it's been like listening to the community. What are their pain points and how can we help solve those pain points, but also moving very quickly to solve them when they need them being solved.
I imagine that you've had a real influx of people who are seeking jobs at the moment, seeking new work. How do you give advice to candidates, to freelancers, on how to stand out more in what's going to be quite a competitive market these days?
What's magic is the community support each other. So, I mean, it's impossible to give advice to 500,000 members. It's just, I wish I could. But yeah, no, what's lovely on the Dots is, we've got in the call out section, you can go, can you give me feedback on my CV or my portfolio? And the community is really, really supportive of each other. And actually what I've loved about this time is we found that seniors who are, in a position that their incomes are secure, are increasingly want to give back. So, for example, we signed up what we call 500 mentors that are now part of the Dots, that answer questions that are posted by the Dots. And that was literally off the back of, I was getting so many emails from seniors going, how can we help? I was like, okay, this is how you can help. Here's like endless CV call out. Here's people needing advice on, I've just, one of the most heartbreaking answers, I've just been 500 people have just been made redundant in the office. How do I cope with this? And suddenly you've got like 60 mentors from across the industry giving you advice. And so, yeah, the community is just supporting each other, which is lovely to see those blocks.
That's so lovely. I think one of the most wonderful things that's happened in this time of crisis is the way that people want to help each other, want to support each other. It's really great to hear that that's transferring to the workplace in that sort of way, in terms of tangible ways to help people find work in what's going to be a really, really difficult time. You have a lot of events on the website. What advice or tips do you have for companies that are switching to digital events? Obviously, we've done the same thing, and there's a lot of them out there now. I think people are seeing that attendance rates have changed really over lockdown. What do you think companies can do now to do that better, to make a digital event amazing, to stand out from other things that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting for us in the event section, because pre-COVID, all our events were in-person events, and then everything moved virtual overnight. So we've seen some massive trends. I mean, at the beginning, people were just kind of crazy bored in lockdown and sort of enjoying, why not try this virtual thing? I think what we've seen, and especially with our community, because it's a professional community, is just a drive to get shit done now. It's like, if I'm going to an event, I want to get something out of it that's practical, that will improve. I think the masters of that actually at General Assembly, they're really good and really on point, and they use the dots in terms of like tapping in, I think, to that zeitgeist of, right, I've been made redundant, or I'm worried I'm on furlough, I think I'm going to be made redundant, or oh my gosh, maybe this is the time I can start a business or do a startup. And we're finding the events that are really resonating are really thinking about practical tips people can do to improve. And I think it's lovely, like, that we're going to have Q&A at the end, because I think, you know, having it all interactive is lovely as well.
Absolutely. I can ask certain questions, but you know, I love it when we get to the Q&A part, because there'll be all sorts of questions that we won't have thought of that people want to know the answers to. And that's just a little reminder to everybody, if you haven't been putting your questions in to be asked later, we'll be moving to questions in about 10 minutes, so get on that. For founders who are building marketplace type products, what are the things that they should know? Pitfalls, things that are really important, stuff that you wish you'd known earlier on?
Yeah, I mean, two-sided marketplaces are very, very tough. I think you kind of have to pick a side to begin with. You know, I chose the community because really what I learned early on in the piece is companies, funnily enough, are the easier bit to acquire, but you know, really worrying about the community and what they're getting out of the community is the most important thing. I think what I was a bit guilty of when we first started was spending too long building things and only to deploy them and to learn that they weren't really what the community wanted. So now we're very much quicker in terms of our product development. And the way we do it actually is we run off OKRs, not KPIs, which are objectives and key results. But we actually separate our team into core and explore. So the core team, they work on improving features that are kind of proven, and we know our community needs better features. So for example, around applying for a job. But the explore team are about shipping new ideas, testing those ideas, learning if they work. If they don't work, we move them out. And that's a mixture of like just getting real world feedback from our community via chatting to them, or actually like looking at the data on the site. So I think that would be my big advice is, you know, you get instincts as a founder, and sometimes they're right, but you know, 95% of your features you're going to build aren't going to work. I'll tell you that. So you want to find out quicker if they are going to work or they aren't going to work.
This is the, you know, the old adage, you should be really embarrassed by the first version of a couple of versions of what you put out there. And I think that that goes for features as well, because you've got to just get something together, throw it out there, see if people use it, see what they ask you for, see what they hate about it. And if nobody uses it, even if you improve it, you're probably barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah, and from that, you know, a third of my team is data analytics and research now, because that's the way that we keep in touch of how things are improving and are we doing a better job. And so, yeah, I think that's a muscle that every founder needs to learn as they go through.
How can people focus? How can founders focus on focus their budget on being able to allow for those kinds of roles when it's sort of, you know, it feels like you want to focus on building, on getting the product out there, on dev, on engineering, that data analytics work? How do you manage to figure out those early budgets in terms of what percentage of your funds you should be putting into each?
Yeah, I think in the end, you know, building's fine, but you've got to know if it works or not. And so, you know, you could be shipping 5 things or 5 features, and 1 could work and 4 couldn't. And your stats could still be looking like they're going up because that 1 feature is a winner, but the other 4 are bringing things down. So really, I mean, we think about product as a holistic whole. You know, every team has to have data, front-end engineering, back-end engineering, product and design, because otherwise you could be feeling like you're ticking things off the box. We ship this, we ship this, we ship this, but you don't know what's working or what's not. So I think that, you know, and interestingly, when you think about raising investment, one of the key things that investors look for is teams that, understand facts and data and can react fast to those facts. You will just move a lot quicker if you know what's working and not working, instead of just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping one of the things stick.
Yeah, establishing those measurements. I think it's really easy to focus on operation and development and delivery, but working out what does success look like? How do we know when we get there? Is something that's sort of easy to breeze by a little bit early on with the enthusiasm of getting things going. And we talked a bit about the focus on diversity, on diverse thinking, diverse people. How are companies that are hiring ensuring that they have diverse candidates? Obviously, you're doing that through your platform, but are you seeing companies employing particular techniques so that they can make the most out of those, or trying other things that can help them reach a more diverse audience and make more diverse hires?
Yeah, I think the most important thing when we start chatting to companies is like, we've got a talent pool that's diverse. Like, hiring diverse talent is now easy because we exist. I think the most important thing companies need to do first is look at, have they built an environment that's inclusive? Because, it's fine for them to come to us and say, oh, we want to hire diverse talent. But yeah, that's great. You'll hire them through the dots, but you'll just churn them and you'll lose them within 6 months to a year if you haven't built an environment where everyone can flourish. So really I tend to go back in a step with the companies we work with and say, have you built that? And if not, then I'm kind of part of a collaborative of around 100 diversity organizations. We don't specialize in helping businesses become more inclusive, but I have a whole kind of list of people that can help them. So that's kind of the first step. And the companies that I know are doing this really well are looking at that inclusivity piece first, because otherwise all you're doing is ticking boxes and you're getting people in the door and you're just going to churn through them straight out the door. So if you've got that bit and you're really serious about that bit, the rest is easier thanks to us existing. I mean, it isn't on LinkedIn, you're just going to get the same non-diverse talent. But I think the most important thing is companies need to sort the inclusivity bit first. The other thing is the companies I love are also now have diversity quotas at second interview, diversity at second interviews. And the reason I think that's really important is because you have to remember the incentive of a recruiter in a business. They're just trying to fill the role as quickly as possible. So it might be harder to get a diverse talent pool to second interview, and you can do it quicker, but unless you have quotas in place, people are just going to just not bother. So people who have those, the talent is out there. It just takes a little longer for some roles to find that talent. And so the companies I know that are doing that are really on the ball as well.
Fantastic. So I've got 2 more questions and then we'll open it up to the audience. So get your questions in if you haven't already. Where would you like to see the dots ending up in 3 years, in 5 years? I know this is always a really weird question. Because you're sort of like, well, I want to, but I mean, I can give you the entire massive list of world domination, which I'm planning. But what's sort of what's the next milestone that you'd like to hit, and the one after that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I always think about 10, 15 years in advance. But, the end goal is, I guess, to become the next LinkedIn. It's to become a professional networking platform that's built for a modern generation, a non-hierarchical, more collaborative, and more diverse, more inclusive. That's the long-term vision. In terms of the next steps out, it's starting to open up in different regions, but it's so interesting for me how that thinking has slightly changed during coronavirus, because everything has moved more virtual. So historically, before lockdown, it was very much like, okay, we'll need offices in different cities, and we think about clusters as actual cities, not countries. But now, with everything increasingly moving remote and flexible and virtual, it might not be necessary. So, but yeah, I mean, being in the major kind of cities that we already have hubs in, where we can give as many opportunities to people in those cities as we do to people in London, is definitely where we'll be in the next 5 years. And I'm so sorry to anyone on the call that isn't based in the UK, because our app isn't actually available outside Europe, and it's probably the biggest thing that my community tell me off for.
Oh, okay, well, that should be next on the list. Yeah. So I'm just going to end on a couple of more general things about being an entrepreneur, about being a founder. What's one of the things that you've learned that you would say is sort of one of the top pieces of advice that you would want to give to somebody they might be just starting out, or they might be growing their company? What's one of those things that you wish you'd known or you've really learned through your journey?
I think that there's a couple. I think firstly, just do it. I mean, I meet a lot of founders who say, I've got this brilliant idea, and there's an inherent sort of fear of failure, or I don't want to tell people about it, or shall I actually do it? And I think what I learned was that the people I love most, I mean, everyone is scared of failing. But what I realized is that the people I love most in this world are just proud of me for giving this a shot. And anyone who, if this failed, went, she's a failure, well, I don't want them in my life anyway.
Yeah.
So I think firstly, it's like I've managed to kind of put my fear in a box. And the moment I managed to put my fear in the box, I became much better at my job, because I wasn't worrying about things. I was just doing the right things for the business. And I think the other thing I've learned is you really need support on this journey. It's a very hard journey. You know, I work crazy hours, and I've seen a lot of businesses fail over the years, not because they didn't have a brilliant idea or they didn't have investment or a great team, but because they didn't have kind of the emotional support around them, because it is a series of highs and lows. And I've been really blessed that I have, I have an amazing husband who's sort of backed me and supported me, and he proofreads my emails because I'm dyslexic and I misspell everything. And he's been the one that's been like, you know, you've got this. And my friends as well, I've sort of avoided the drains these days and only surrounded myself, I guess, with people that understand the journey I'm on, because the last thing you need is a friend when you're working to do something great with your life to say, well, to get angry with you or pissed off with you, you're not coming home at night. So I think building a tribe around you is really important. And that's the same with founders. Like, my most powerful network is fellow founders, because founders really only understand what founders go through. And I've got a wonderful group of founders that I lean on, maybe for more emotional support than anything else. It's like founders therapy, basically.
Absolutely. Sometimes you just need someone else there so that you can message them or speak to them and just be like, wow, everything's really shit, isn't it?
Yes.
Life is shit, business is shit, why am I doing this? Who will get that you don't actually mean I don't want to do this or why am I doing this, but who can empathize with what it feels like to be in that place and not question your motivations or whether you should be doing it, but accept that sometimes you just feel that way.
Yeah, and also, you know, founders, some of the things you go through is very distinct to us. And so having someone else going, oh, when I went through something like this is how I managed it, is such valuable learnings to have along the way. And so, yeah, no, I love my founder cubes.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that I started TechHub all those years ago, was because of that feeling of being a lonely entrepreneur and maybe some of your friends not getting it because they haven't been through it. And that's really sometimes just someone else who you can, you know, look across the room, just be like, and they're like, yeah, know that feeling, you've got this, you're fine. It's incredibly valuable, as you say. Thank you so much for answering all of my pointy questions. I really appreciate that, and sharing some of that advice and experience. I think it's incredibly helpful for people to just get an insight into what other people's work lives, businesses are like. But now I'm going to open it up to questions. We will have questions coming up on the screen. Here we go. James is asking, how do you identify the team you need around you while still remaining lean? Oh, good question. it's often easy to want departments or people, but what pushes you into who to hire?
Yeah, so this is my second tech business. I actually had a tech business in Australia, and I think the most important thing I had done, and it was quite a corporate thing to get done, was a 360 review of myself. And what happened was one of my shareholders interviewed my team, our clients, people we work with, other shareholders. And what I ended up with was a document on like what I was really good at, what I was not very good at, and learnings from my last business for this business. And I think the reason I say that is the most important thing you learn as a founder is where your core strengths are. And you should never hire someone like you, ever, because that's where the clashes sort of happen, and this is where founder fallout sort of happen. You're trying to build a team that's very diverse in all sense of the words, and you need people around you that compensate for your weaknesses. And so that document was just amazing at making me look in the mirror and go, okay, you know, for example, in Australia, I was doing a lot of, you know, I have a background in economics and maths, so I was doing a lot of the kind of more ops side of the business. It wasn't my strength. I could do it. It wasn't my strength. So here I've got an incredible COO, CFO that leads that side. So I think the first step is you have to know yourself and where you're good and where your strengths are. Lean into those strengths and put people around you that are brilliant at the things that you're not brilliant at, all the things that don't give you energy, because you need a lot of energy as a founder. You might be good at something, but if it's not giving you energy, get someone else to do that. And that's kind of how I've built my team, just hiring brilliant people to do things that I can't do or hate doing.
The hiring brilliant people thing, I think, is a big one for me on that. I often think one of the best decisions I've ever made in business was hiring Andrew Tibbetts, who may be watching right now, who's our COO, because when he let me know that he would be interested in working with me, I was like, well, I don't have a role, you know, sort of open for you right now, but you're such a fantastic person. I need to have you around me. And I think sometimes it's really important, and, you know, to the question, sometimes people come along who, you know, will add value to your business, even if you're not entirely certain how initially. And it's always worth giving that a try when you get that feeling of, right, yeah, this person. And, you know, for me, we've ended up running the business together, and so it's just, you know, those kinds of decisions sometimes you have to take on a bit of gut feel as much as you go through that processing of what can I do and what am I not good at. Sometimes there is this person is going to add value.
And I think the interesting thing is, I mean, in the end, we're the most sophisticated machines or robots that exist. We've taken loads of little data all the time and synthesized that intuition and gut feeling. So yeah, I mean, gut definitely plays a part as well. But gut can be wrong. But that's where it's just important to be able to let people go when they're not right.
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to ascertain when to fire and fire fast is really important. That was one of the most important things that I've learned, because the first handful of times was really hard and really agonizing, and I waited way too long. And it's not good for anybody, because if someone's in a role that's not going to make them happy, they're not going to be happy either.
And one bad apple can rot a barrel, so it's really important to, yeah, and fire ethically as well. I think I've learned you can definitely let people go ethically. Just because they're not right for your business doesn't mean they're not going to be right for someone else.
Yeah, I think that this is, you know, nobody's bad, nobody's wrong. It's just that it's not a good fit. So Masha has asked, any tips for bootstrapping when you're giving the product away for free in the early days? Very good question. You've obviously been through that.
Yeah. Well, I literally just downsized my whole life. So, you know, when I first started my first business, I'd saved a bit of money from working at MTV, not much, because they basically paid you on Jägermeister. And I just learned how to live really frugally. You know, I lived off tuna when tuna was cheap. It's not that cheap anymore. And so I just really looked at my life and went, what am I paying for that is superfluous to what I'm doing? And then it's a lot of graft, basically. You know, I did take on investment because there was only so far I could take that. My savings weren't big, so I did have to raise investment, because sometimes there just becomes a point where you can't do it forever. You can get kind of creative on revenue streams, but the challenge with that sometimes is, does it deflect from what you're trying to build? So yeah, it's tough, and that's why so many founders have to go down, you know, the investment route.
How do you juggle the revenue versus building? How did you juggle that when you were trying to work out which was the more important thing?
Yeah, I mean, we juggled it by not worrying about the revenue and taking on investment. And weirdly, it came around the right way. I did take a massive punt, which was like, if I care about the community and not so much on the other side, the money will come. It did. But that is a big punt. I'm very lucky that happened. But yeah, I mean, it's really tough because you're being pulled from pillar to post. I think actually the other side on the revenue, something we've been really good at is making sure we obsessed about client churn. So once we kept a client, making sure they stayed with us. And actually that's paid off leaps and bounds in the long run, because a lot of times you hire a quick deal and we'll just get it through the line. And the problem with that is you're just signing up clients and you're churning them. So you might have loads coming in, but you're losing as many the other end. So we did really obsess about, if we are going to bring on someone, that they're going to have brilliant success from the dots. And that meant that our clients have grown with us over time. And I think that was the right move.
That makes a lot of sense. Do we have any other questions at this stage? Cold outreach during COVID. How do you do that?
Oh, do you know what? People have time on their hands. It's the best time ever for cold outreach. I think people are more open than ever. I mean, they're more accessible than ever. I think it depends on who they are, but I think helping people is always a lovely way to get to know them. I mean, we see that on the dots a lot, where people will kind of help people out. So you'll have accountants on the dots who are asking finance related questions, and then suddenly they become an accountant. Or we've seen coaches on the dots who've said, oh, we'll give a free 1 hour coaching session, and obviously they do 10 of those and 2 of them become clients. So I think it's always nice to help someone. It's not, sometimes the most magical things that have happened in my whole career has been where I've helped someone with no kind of set agenda for why, and then like 5 years later they come out of the woodwork and they're helping me. And I think sometimes you know, you just need to give, and when you give out stuff, things tend to come back. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Absolutely. I think we've got some more questions coming through. Are you doing any mentoring with early stage entrepreneurs? I guess this, you know, follows on very much from around helping other people. How can you do that when you're also focusing so much time on your own business?
Yeah, so when I started out, I was desperate for leading women in tech to be my mentor. And I was emailing, like, you know, Martha Lane Fox and Sherry Kutu and all these amazing like tech visionaries, and no one was getting back to me. And I was like, this is so rude. I'm a woman in tech. I need support. What I've sort of realized is, I mean, I get about 60 emails a week at the moment from people wanting mentoring support. And the reality is there just aren't enough female founders out there. So, you know, at Martha's level, there's like 100. At my level, maybe, you know, 500. So what I did is I changed tact, and I started hitting up senior men in tech who had daughters. And suddenly it completely changed, and suddenly I had these incredible mentors like, you know, Ben Grohl, who he basically was one of the first people that invented growth at Facebook. Suddenly he's mentoring me, but they were suddenly like, it got a lot easier. And so I guess the reason I'm telling this story is it's much easier actually to find senior men in tech to mentor, because there's just more of them. Hopefully that will change. There's an army coming below me. So I do mentor, but like, it's just in the wave or tsunami of inquiries I get is just not possible to take on more. So if you are looking for a mentor, I'd actually recommend going, this is more for a female founder, but you are looking for a mentor, I'd recommend going to senior man in tech who has a daughter, and you'll end up punching way above your weight in terms of who will support you.
Well, I think you need to reach out to people who have the kinds of skills that you're hoping to be mentored in. And if there are more men in the industry, well, part of the way that we create more women in the industry is for women to be mentored by the men who've had the experience already. So, if everybody is happy to offer their time and their expertise, and is able to try and focus that on people who are less represented in the tech industry, then that's a really wonderful thing. If we can all do that. Got another question. So how do you convince new brands to post opportunities on the dots? Is the hiring and matching process completely automated, or is there human assistance?
So in terms of the company, so we don't act like a recruitment agent, so we don't match people. So it is, I guess, automated. In terms of how we convince new companies, I mean, they mainly come to us these days, which is kind of a lovely position to be in. We do have a team, but it's primarily account managers that when they discover the dots, that they just make sure they're looked after and stay with us. The way it works is there's two different ways people find talent through the dots. One is the kind of more traditional job post. And when they post a job, they get sent a short list of 10 candidates that exactly match that job. And then they can hit those people up directly, as including seeing the people that came through from the application. So the way to kind of get onto that list, it's partly down to the curation we do, which is very very conscious of diversity, but it's also about making sure that you've been on the platform recently, that your skills are up to date, that your career history is up to date. If you've got up-to-date projects, and then you come higher in search results. Or a lot of companies that use us don't even post jobs. They just search for talent directly through the platform. And a lot of ways they do that is actually searching projects. So they'll search a project and look for the full team around that project. So kind of a big tip is making sure that anything you've worked on, so if you've worked on an app, you put that you credit yourself on that app, and then that will be discovered by companies looking for talent.
Oh, interesting. And so people might be looking for one kind of person, and then see, oh, well, we also need to hire, the designer as well as the dev, and this person worked on this product that we really like, and so that's how they find them.
Yeah, and a lot of time recruiters, they shortcut like brands and products for finding people. So, they'll go, we've heard Monzo's great. So they'll literally do a search for Monzo and then see anyone who's worked on kind of Monzo product. And that can be a diverse skill set, from the product managers to the project managers to the developers to the designers. So the key for being discovered on that search is making sure that you've updated the work you've done, but also getting credit for work. So it's very easy, if there's a project that you worked on that's already on the dots, you can credit yourself in that project. Great.
I think we've got some more. Conscious scaling. Yeah, it's a great term. What are the building blocks of your approach to that?
Yeah, I think conscious scaling, I mean, you summed it up really brilliantly earlier, which is thinking about the future ramifications of anything you build, and how that could have a negative impact on your business long term. So, that's everything from when we're going through algorithm development, it's really challenging each other. Is this going to lead to biased algorithms of the future? And making sure, that those things that can bias an algorithm aren't biasing our algorithm. A challenge, for example, is, a way LinkedIn builds their algorithm is who you're connected with. But obviously, if you've got an existing powerful network, then that means people with an existing powerful network come higher in search results. And then it's a reinforcing bias. So whenever we're kind of developing it, our tech is making sure, is it something that is available for everyone? So, for example, with our Ask forum, the asks actually go out to everyone. And the reason we do that is because we want to make sure that you don't have a bias to an existing network. The whole point is someone who doesn't have a network has contact to people. So it is a constant juggle, but it's something that we have to always make sure when we're developing the tech that it makes it accessible to everyone, even if you don't have an existing network.
Did you have much of a learning curve when you've been hiring people in terms of communicating to them about how they need to think about those implications of the work that they're doing?
Yeah, so the disastrous hires I've made in the past is where I've literally met someone and their skills are amazing, and then on final interviews their values don't match, and funnily enough they're always the ones that don't last. So we always do values screening before we do any other screening, and I'm part of that values screening. And our values at the Dots are positivity, diversity, collaboration, drive, and we have kind of screening questions to check that people are on point for values. And it doesn't matter how good they are, if they're not passionate about diversity, there's no point working at the Dots, and it won't work out. So that kind of screens it from the get-go.
How did you develop that kind of screening? How did you develop those kinds of questions? If people watching this want to go through the same sort of exercise, how do you start putting that together?
Yeah, I think the first most important thing is to kind of, what are your values? And so we spent a lot of time thinking about kind of the core values of the business, and that's the first step. And then it was developing the questions, was just a kind of a big post-it note collaboration of the questions. So, for example, one of the best questions is like, how would your friends describe you, for the positivity question? And it's amazing what people say on the call, like, you know, whingy, bitchy, and you're just there going, oh my God. So yeah, and I think, you know, other questions in terms of like the pro-social side is like, you know, what, you know, the world is a crazy place right now. If you could change one thing, what would it be? And it tells you a lot about a person. And I think sometimes it's just it's just really listening after the question, not interrupting them straight away, just let them keep talking, and you get a really good sense of the kind of developers they are. I mean, one of my amazing developers, Bill, I was talking about like, what does he love most in the world? And he started talking about his son, and then he got teary. And at that point, I'm like, you are so perfect for the task. And he was talking about how much he loved his son. And it was one of those, you just let people talk, and you start identifying if there is values fit in the business.
How can you remove confirmation bias and the network, you know, confirmation effect through that process? Obviously you're looking for people who share your values, and that's really important. How do you make sure that the way you ask the questions, or the kinds of questions you're asking, or the answers that you're getting don't sound different to you because you're not from the background that the person answering them is?
Yeah, so like Google, we hire by committee. And so it's not just me and someone, it's usually a team of 5 to 6 who go through the whole hiring process, and everyone has to be very different as part of that hiring person, because we all have biases. You know, the reason the Dots is primarily a female platform, and you know, 68% female, is that's my bias. And so, for example, I used to bias extroverts over introverts, which I completely don't anymore, but that was a bias that if I didn't have a committee hiring around me would have been reinforced. So I think when you're hiring, having a committee and making sure that that committee reflects society as a whole, that means you start alleviating each other's bias, which we all have. We all have bias.
James is asking, how did you know your product was ready to raise funding? It's a great question. Particularly in the early days when it's not ready.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's completely different from our last round and the first round. You're so right. You know, the first round, they're investing in an idea and a team. And so we weren't ready, but they knew we weren't ready. They knew we were ready as a team, but the product wasn't ready. The second round was completely different. You know, product market fit is everything. You know, so many founders get stuck on the traps of trying to market or promote a product before it's ready. So, you know, last round, it was really raising when we knew that we had product market fit, and that was the most important thing. But it changes every stage you go through, it changes.
I think we've got another 1 or 2 questions left. Yeah, good question. How many on your team? How do you set that team up?
So there's 22 on my team, and we set the team up. It's primarily product. Oh gosh, about 80% of my team are products, so that's data, research, engineering, design. And the way we set it up is core and explore. So half the team are core and half the team are explore. And so they have very different OKRs. The core team's OKRs are very much based on the parts of the product that we know really, really well, and that we know that minor improvements have great impact. So, you know, the job posting area, the experience for clients, people posting projects, and then the half the team are kind of, I guess, explorers, and that's more experimental based development, and that's coming up with crazy ideas, launching those ideas, and then learning if they work or not. If they work, then we move them into core. So yeah, it's a lovely setup for kind of innovation, and people are natural corers or explorers, you know. So, you know, some engineers love like making sure the code is perfect and that it's a properly scalable platform, and they're much more suited to core. And then the explorers are kind of more hacky, I guess, but not terribly hacky, but more hacky.
That makes sense. I think we've got 2 more questions. Which countries are you looking to launch in? So which are the next few, and which are the ones longer term?
It's a really good question, and it's really hard for me to answer at the moment. I mean, our biggest hubs are in Europe. So our biggest hubs are kind of Paris, Berlin, Amsterdam. But then a lot of the companies we work with, their headquarters are in the US. So it will be Europe, US, or maybe simultaneously. But as I said, everything's changing right now because everything's moving virtual. Our thinking around how to roll out. So the next step actually might be just launching our app in the US before we have literally have an office over there, just because there's so many remote and freelance and virtual opportunities on the dots now. We don't necessarily need to be domiciled in the US. And I quite like for Trump to be out the window before I went to the US.
Well, it's a big one, that one, isn't it? So we've had a couple of other questions, but we're starting to run out of time. So I guess really, are there other ways that people can get in touch with you if they want to ask questions? Should they tweet you? Should they connect with you on the dots?
Yeah, please don't connect with me on LinkedIn. It's like my pet hate. I ignore messages on LinkedIn. Yeah, the dots. I actually respond to every emails on Saturdays. So because of my dyslexia, I do it on Saturdays. So drop me on the dots, and then if you've got questions, posting them to our community is a brilliant way to do it. So, you know, I answer questions that are posted by the community, but, you know, my knowledge is part. There are loads of other amazing founders that are there to support with other questions. So sometimes it's better getting lots of different pieces of advice so you know what's best for you instead of one person just telling you what to do.
Absolutely. I often respond the same when I get lots of questions. We have, you know, the founders of 400 companies at TechHub in London, and, you know, they have hugely diverse experiences and backgrounds and experiences with growing their products and life experiences. And so they're often going to give you much more interesting and different responses than I might. And everybody's there as a resource. That's the wonderful thing about a community, is that you have this resource that's available there all of the time. And it's like a great big diverse group mind, you know, some sort of, I don't know, I'm getting some sort of Borg kind of thing here, but it's definitely a range of ideas and a range of opinions is always going to be the most helpful, I think.
Yeah, I do think everyone's journey is so different, and so there's no kind of carbon footprint. So I think the most valuable thing I get is diverse perspectives on a challenge I'm going through, and then listening to your intuition and taking all those different perspectives and kind of going, okay, for my situation, this is probably the best way to go. So yeah, more brains, more collaborative brains are a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for generously giving your time and insights into your experience and your expertise on this chat. Really, really appreciate it, especially knowing just how busy you are. thank you very much to everybody who's tuned in, and for all of your questions. It's always really valuable having people ask things that I might not think of, ask things that are particular to experiences that you're going through right now, because so many other people will be going through exactly the same experiences. So thank you very much, and please everybody do share the link to this event so that everybody can hear more about what Pip has had to say. As Purdy said earlier, you can go to techhub.com to see all of the other events and sessions like this that we have coming up. You can follow us at TechHub on Twitter, and we're always posting about all of the great stuff we have coming up, and our partners and friends in the industry as well. So there's a lot of opportunities to learn more and grow your business. So thanks very much again, Pip.
Pleasure.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Bye.